Welcome to the debauchery.
Dolls. Are you one of those people who think they're cute? Or are you of the group that thinks they're creepy as fuck? Today we'll talk about a man who thought of them as his children. Also, stay tuned after the main story for a surprise bonus. I'm Dave Jari. Garrett? Garrett, where are you? Garrett? Garrett? Garrett!
Fast as fuck, boy.
What's good, all you criminals, debauched, and true crime douchebags out there, and welcome to this episode of Criminal AF.
Fast as fuck, boy.
I'm Dave Jari, and I'm all by myself for this one. And why is that? It's a good question, I'll tell you. As a lot of you know, I mentioned that shortly after coming back from my vacation this summer, I received a promotion at work. And with this promotion, I've been given a new work schedule. Now, after completing about a month's worth of training on day shift throughout July and August, I've been assigned to a new shift that is the total opposite of the shift Garrett, Casey, and I had been working on. Now, not just opposite hours, opposite days off as well. So while Garrett is working, I'm off, and when I'm working, Garrett is off. So it makes it pretty near impossible for us to schedule some time together to get into the studio. So what does that mean for Criminal AF, you may be wondering? Nothing long-term, but it'll be a little different for a time. Not sure what that time frame will be, but I've been told it could be anywhere from a month to 6 months, and considering I'm now into month 2 of this new job, it's looking more likely the latter. But now that my training is done and I'm settling into my new role and schedule, I'll be putting out some episodes for the time being until we can all get back together on the same schedule. And we all know Garrett brings a little extra flavor to the show. I'll do my best to keep that same energy, though it'll never be the same without my little Gare Bear being here. So, here we are with Criminal AF Presents.
Fast as fuck, boy.
These episodes will just be me spewing some quick stories about some random shit and things that I find particularly interesting. Some stories may not exactly be true crime, but it'll be provoking to say the least. Now, I do want to personally apologize to our faithful listeners and Patreon members. I know we've lost a few of you while this whole transition was going on, and, I can completely understand that. Why would you want to financially support a show that hasn't put out any new episodes? No hard feelings, we get it. We wouldn't want to do it either, so just know that Gary and I, we love you all the same. For those that have stuck around, we fucking love you too, and you are all amazing, and we all owe you so much. With that being said, we are going to make a slight change to our Patreon to make it a little more simpler for our listeners. We will now be offering only 2 tiers for our amazing friends of the show. There will be a $2 general support tier where you can contribute less than a cup of coffee from Dunkies a month just to say thanks. And then we'll have our $5 tier where you can get everything associated with Criminal AF. Ad-free episodes, bonus episodes, whatever else we put out. So anyone who is currently in the higher tiers can resubscribe to one of the 2 tiers mentioned. So, all right. With this being...
Fast as fuck, boy.
We're just going to jump right into this fucked up story about a man from Russia who took doll collecting to the extreme. How extreme, Dave? Well, so extreme, he ended up having 29 total life-size dolls in an apartment he shared with his parents. He had names for these dolls, ages, backstories, you name it. So kick off your shoes, sit back, relax, get all snuggled in, and tell your kids the Tooth Fairy ain't bringing any money unless they go to fuck to bed because it's time to fuck this episode in the mouth. So we're going to begin with a man named Anatoly Moskvin. He was born in Nizhny Novgorod. Say that 3 times fast. It's Russia's 5th largest city. He was the only child of his parents, Elvira and Urim, and he was born on September 1st, 1966. From a young age, it was apparent that Anatoly was, to put it nicely, different. He kept to himself, had trouble socializing with other children, and was often bullied. He was also extremely intelligent, earning top grades in his class, and many throughout his life considered him a genius. Those who have studied him believe he was, and is, on the autism spectrum. He would spend whatever money he had earned as a child and buy himself books, and by doing so, taught himself multiple languages. Around the age of 8, Anatoly would experience a traumatic incident that is said to have changed him and taught him that the world he lived in could become very dark and cold. On his way home from school, he was beaten and raped by an adult male and came home covered in bruises. According to Anatoly, on March 4th, 1979, when he was 12, he had a strange experience that significantly changed the course of his life. Anatoly was participating in a school project. There was sort of a challenge for the students, like who can collect the most recycling. So this led to a number of the children traveling outside the comfort of their own neighborhoods, including Anatoly. During one such endeavor, Anatoly found himself alone in a neighborhood he was unfamiliar with. He passed a home and went into the yard to gather up their recycling when he stumbled upon a group of 13 people holding candles in what appeared to be some sort of ritual. In one version of the story, they wore suits. In another version, they wore black robes. As he looked closer, he saw a coffin in the center of the group. It was open, but he couldn't see inside from where he was standing. The group noticed Anatoly, and he turned to run away, but one of the adults grabbed him and steered him inside the house. This is when he learned the group was holding a funeral for 11-year-old Natasha Petrova, who had died accidentally from being electrocuted in her bathtub. The girl's mother approached to frighten Anatoly and urged him to kiss the corpse of the young girl, which he refused. However, the mother kept insisting and eventually forced his face close to Natasha's until he had no choice but to kiss her forehead again and again and again. By the third time he kissed her, he found that he had actually enjoyed the experience. As if in a bizarre fairy tale, the mother then produced 2 brass rings, one of which she placed on Anatoly's finger and the other on Natasha's. "There," she proclaimed. "Now you are married." He was then made to promise he would not tell anyone of this ritual for 40 days and then was sent away with coins and fruit. Now, there are countries that practice posthumous marriage ceremonies. Is known as necrogamy, although Russia is not one. It's most commonly performed in China in the form of ghost marriages in which one or both of the parties is deceased. Now, how did this affect Anatoly? Well, he later reported that following this bizarre encounter, Natasha visited him in his dreams nightly, where she would torment him and urge him to return to the cemetery in which she was buried and perform black magic rituals. Anatoly refused to ever return to that village, and night after night, for days and weeks on end, Natasha would return to his dreams, urging him to visit and perform black magic. Eventually, Anatoly did visit the cemetery again, and acted out the rituals as Natasha had described in his dreams. The dream stopped, for a while. Anatoly eventually told his parents of the marriage ritual, and that Natasha would visit him in his dreams nightly. Confused and concerned for their son, Elvira and Urim would bring Anatoly to a doctor, who diagnosed these recurring dreams as being caused by puberty. He was prescribed a sedative to help him sleep and sent back home. Not long after, the nightly visits returned, with Natasha now demanding that Anatoly procure a tooth from another boy and place it under his pillow. She would then collect it, tooth fairy style, and attach herself to the tooth's owner. Somehow, Anatoly managed to get another boy's tooth, did as he was instructed, and was finally left in peace by Natasha. He still made an annual visit to her gravesite, hoping to keep her spirit at rest. Following this incident, Anatoly developed a macabre fascination or obsession with death, burial practices, and cemeteries that would consume him for the rest of his life. He loved strolling through cemeteries, studying the gravestones, and enjoying the serenity. In fact, he coined the term necropolist, meaning expert on cemeteries, to refer to himself. After secondary school, Anatoly enrolled in the Gorky Institute of Foreign Languages, where he earned a degree in philology, which is the study of languages. Anatoly was a polyglot, speaking 13 different languages, many of which he had taught himself. As an interesting side note, this is the age, late teens, early to mid-20s, at which symptoms of schizophrenia, such as delusions and hallucinations, usually are diagnosed. Just keep that in mind. Now, Anatoly earned a PhD from Moscow State University, specializing in Celtic history. He was a linguist by profession, writing scholarly articles and books, including dictionaries and teaching languages. A nerd's nerd, you could say. It was around this time that he took a deeper interest in the black magic and the occult, and found some like-minded people, joining a group of Luciferians. Perhaps he was influenced by the rituals he had supposedly performed at Natasha's behest. His beliefs would become increasingly bizarre, prompting him to engage in some truly sinister activities. After completing his studies at Moscow State University, Anatoly would work there as a lecturer, but it didn't take long for his peers and students to realize his eccentric beliefs and his awkward and sometimes uncomfortable demeanor. He was very difficult to work with, so he was let go from the university not long after. In 2003, he began a relationship with a woman named Yalia. They never consummated the relationship, as this was against Anatoly's oath of celibacy. However, they wanted a child together, but Anatoly's parents, whom he still lived with, were totally against the idea. Anatoly and Yalia went through the necessary steps of adoption anyway, and they attempted to adopt a baby girl. But because of Anatoly's living situation, the fact that they weren't married and didn't earn enough money, they were denied, obviously. The relationship fell apart shortly thereafter. This is believed to be the tipping point between reality and fantasy for Anatoly. Since he couldn't have a child of his own, he would give someone else's child another chance at life, as we will soon learn. In 2005, Anatoly began work with a fellow academic to help write a catalog of area cemeteries. Countless records were destroyed during the Cold War, and Anatoly had explored a total of 752 cemeteries in less than 3 years, noting the information on the gravestones. Not surprisingly, he loved this job and was as happy as a proverbial pig in shit. He was quoted as saying, "I am attracted to cemeteries like a magnet." He would come to know everyone's names, the dates they were born and died, and the cause of their deaths, all by memory. He didn't take any food or water with him during these long hours of documenting gravestones, often opting to drink out of puddles. He even slept in the cemeteries, either on benches, the grass, or in one case, he was found by a group of grave diggers sleeping in a coffin which had been scheduled to be buried. He found the accommodation cozy. People began noticing this strange man occupying the cemeteries at all hours of the night, including by the undesirables of the villages. Anatoly was beaten and robbed several times while he was researching these graveyards. To help make ends meet while doing this project, Anatoly would accept per diem jobs working with children as a language tutor. He would help these children with any number of the 13 languages he was fluent in. His mother, Elvira, said Anatoly was happiest when working with children. Oddly enough, this love of children would ultimately lead to his demise. He began developing very macabre habits during this time. Perhaps it was something he learned while practicing black magic or as a Luciferian. Anatoly began sleeping on the graves of children, particularly the graves of young girls, and soon, he would later say, the children began to talk to him. They would visit him in his dreams as he slept on their graves, and would only sleep on the graves of children who liked him. Using his knowledge of local history, he would ask these children questions to decipher if they were actual spirits or demonic beings acting like children. And of course, the children knew the answers to all of Anatoly's questions. Probably because he wanted the children to be real. I mean, let's face it. Around 2009, strange occurrences were happening around a number of these cemeteries. Some visitors noticed that the graves of their loved ones had been tampered with. Some appeared as though the soil had been disturbed, while others found letters or cards placed on the graves. One night in 2011, police patrolling a cemetery noticed a man who appeared to be painting a gravestone. They asked for his identification and found that he was none other than 43-year-old necropolist extraordinaire Anatoly Moskvin. For one reason or another, Anatoly agreed to take police back to the apartment he shared with his parents, and what the officers found would shock and horrify them. Before even entering the apartment, the police were assaulted by the sickening smell of human decay. Once inside, they found that every surface of the small apartment was covered with clothes, newspapers, Anatoly's collection of 60,000 books, and most disturbingly, numerous life-sized dolls. All female, the dolls ranged from toddler size to adult size and were clothed in a variety of outfits: bonnets, dresses, boots, jackets, hats, and scarves. Some appeared to be wearing makeup. They were everywhere, perched on the furniture, sitting on the floor, or lying randomly about. When Anatoly's parents, who appeared to be oblivious to the smell, were asked about the dolls, they replied that their son always had an interest in lifelike dolls. "We knew it was a hobby to make big dolls," said his mother. When one officer moved a doll, he heard music and discovered that Anatoly had placed a music box inside of it. At the same time, police came to the realization that these were not dolls, but mummified human remains. At the police station, Anatoly spoke freely. He said that he had been robbing the graves of newly deceased females since 2003, when he got the idea to adopt them as his own, when his own adoption application was denied. He said that he would go to the cemetery in the middle of the night, where he would dig up the freshly interred corpse and begin the preservation or mummification process. First, he wrapped them in a mixture of salt and baking soda, then stuffed rags inside of them and wrapped nylon tights around their heads and legs. For their face, he took the plastic or porcelain from an actual doll face and fit it carefully over their skull. Eyes consisted of paint or buttons, because the girls had to be able to see, so that they could watch cartoons with Anatoly. He made sure to record their vital statistics from their headstones, so that he could celebrate their birthdays, at which they would be presented with gifts. He talked to his girls in their own language. There was a total of 26 bodies in the apartment, with an additional 3 bodies in the garage, those who had somehow fallen out of favor with their creator. Like, had they misbehaved? Did they stink too much? Like, why were they in the garage? Now, the human dolls, they ranged in age from 3 to 25. The oldest one in terms of seniority had been with Anatoly for 9 years. Not surprisingly, news of the ghoulish professor and his macabre menagerie of human dolls spread quickly. Anatoly was given the nickname, the Lord of the Mummies, and was charged with 44 separate criminal counts, including desecration of graves. In 2012, he was given a psychiatric evaluation and found to be unfit to stand trial, having been diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia. He has been in a psychiatric facility since that time, and as of last report, was not considered well enough to be released. So you're probably wondering, what the fuck is wrong with this guy? Now, Anatoly was diagnosed with schizophrenia, which is defined as a serious mental illness marked by being out of touch with reality. Although it can't be cured, it can be regulated with medication. Now, looking at his history, we can see that Anatoly exhibited many signs of schizophrenia. And it's interesting to note that nobody has been able to verify the existence of Natasha Petrova, let alone the events of her funeral. Was this all a delusion, a figment of Anatoly's imagination? Probably never know. He reported that he only unearthed bodies who told him that they wanted to be rescued and live with him. He laid on the ground above their specific grave, and if he heard a voice saying that they wanted to come out, he would oblige. Auditory hallucinations or magical thinking? Again, no way to know. The reason he was not punished by law is that his mental disease or defect made him unable to appreciate the wrongfulness of his acts. He said that while he was aware that grave robbing was illegal, he felt the need to rescue the girls from their graves was more important. He stated that he meant to keep them until he could figure out a way to reanimate them, either through magic or science. In court, he expressed no remorse, telling the girls' families, "You put them in the ground. I brought them home and warmed them up." So what are your thoughts on Anatoly and his dolls? Do you think he was out of touch with reality? Can you imagine his parents sharing an apartment with a bunch of decomposing humans and remaining clueless? Or did they choose plausible deniability? Like they knew, but they pretended not to know? You know, I don't know. If my kids brought home death and I smelt it, yeah, I would 100% no. You know, I'd be like, what the fuck is that? So leave us a comment about your thoughts regarding the story on our social media or on Spotify. All comments are welcome, even the ones that call us douchebags, because, hey, algorithms work the same. It doesn't care if it's good or bad. A comment is a comment. It shows that there's discussion happening. So let's hear them. Now, shout out goes to Debbie from True Crime University for writing and sharing this story with me. She knows how insanely hectic it's been, so I can't express my gratitude enough. Now, I promised a bonus to this episode, and since we're on the topic of dolls and it's nearly Halloween, let's talk about arguably the most haunted doll on the planet. No, we're not talking about Annabelle, although she is a fucking freak of a doll. We're here to talk about Robert. Now, a good part of this story comes from the website ghostsandgravestones.com, with some added tidbits sprinkled in, so go check out that site and many more regarding Robert the doll. Now, the story of Robert goes like this. In the early 1900s, when a young boy named Eugene Robert Otto was given a one-of-a-kind handmade doll by a servant that worked for his parents in his home. Eugene, who everyone called Robert, also named the doll Robert and told everyone, "Now my name is Gene. I'm Gene. The doll is Robert." Now, Gene and Robert quickly became attached and were now best of friends. The home where Eugene lived, now called the Artist House, is located at 534 Easton Street. It was built between 1890 and 1898. It was here that Gene was given Robert the doll, and where a friendship that lasted throughout his lifetime and beyond was forged. While he seemed like an ordinary cloth doll, it wasn't long before Robert was involved in strange and somewhat terrifying events. The first hint that something out of the ordinary was happening was one night when Gene, who was only 10 years old at the time, awoke to find Robert the doll sitting at the end of his bed, staring at him. Moments later, his mother was awakened by his screams for help and the sounds of furniture being overturned in her son's bedroom. Gene cried for help, begging his mother to rescue him. When she finally was able to wrench the locked door open, she saw poor Gene curled up in fear on his bed, his room in shambles, and Robert the doll sitting at the foot of the bed. Nobody knows for sure why or how this child's plaything could actually wreak havoc on a child's bedroom or do anything at all. After all, it's just a toy, right? Well, but the weird and inexplicable didn't stop at that one occurrence. Gene's parents would often hear their son upstairs talking to the doll and then hear a response back in a totally different voice. They reported seeing the doll speak and witnessing his expression change. Giggling and sightings of Roberts running up the steps or staring out the upstairs window were also reported. Now, Robert continued to live with Gene throughout his lifetime, and after Gene's parents died, he moved back into their home with his wife, Anne. Gene decided that the doll needed a room of his own and placed him in the upstairs room that had a window overlooking the street. Now, Anne, she felt uneasy with Robert in the house, and although she couldn't put her finger on it, she wanted Gene to lock the doll up in the attic where he could do no harm. Now, Gene conceded, and as one could imagine, Robert the doll was not happy with his new living arrangements. Soon, visitors to the home heard footsteps in the attic, the sounds of someone pacing back and forth, and devilish giggling. Neighborhood children reported seeing Robert watching them from the window in the upstairs bedroom, and told accounts of the doll actually mocking them as they walked to school. When Gene heard this, he immediately went to investigate, knowing that he had locked Robert in the attic, and there was no way he could be sitting by the window of the upstairs bedroom. But, to his complete shock, when he opened the door to the bedroom, there was Robert, sitting in a rocking chair by the window. Gene locked Robert back up in the attic several times, each time discovering him again sitting by the window in the same upstairs bedroom. Now, Gene Otto, he died in 1974, and when a new owner moved into the house on Eaton Street, their 10-year-old daughter was delighted to find Robert the doll in the attic. But her delight soon ended when she claimed that Robert was alive and that the doll wanted to hurt her. She awoke often in the middle of the night screaming in fear and told her parents that Robert had moved about in the room. Solaris Hills newspaper reporter Malcolm Ross visited Robert at the Artist House and had a very eerie experience with the doll. When Malcolm and a friend entered the room with the doll, Robert's face had an expression of concern, as if to ask, "Who are these people and why are they here?" Now, the friend told Malcolm Robert's backstory and pointed out the children's furniture that had been purchased by Gene. It was at this moment that Malcolm noticed a change in the doll's expression, as if he was following the conversation. One of the men in the room made a comment about what an old fool Gene Otto must have been to build all this furniture for a doll. Again, Robert's expression changed, this time to one of anger. As Malcolm later stated, there was some kind of intelligence there. The doll was listening to us. Now, Myrtle Reuter, the woman who bought the artist house after Gene Otto had passed, kept Robert for 20 years, even taking him to her next home in 1980. But she grew tired of his antics. She donated Robert to the Fort East Martello Museum in 1994, and Myrtle died a few months after donating him. But Robert still continues on to this day. Many believe that the origin of Robert's evil lies in the one who originally gave him to Gene Otto, the servant who worked for Gene's parents. This woman was supposedly mistreated by her bosses, and to punish them, it is believed that she cursed the doll with voodoo and black magic. That might explain the many mysterious and frightening experiences people have had with Robert the doll. But if so, wouldn't the haunting end when the owners died? Nobody really knows for sure, but one thing remains. Robert the doll continues to taunt and scare those who come to view him, especially guests to the Fort East Martello Museum, who attempt to take his photo without express permission. Many have reported their cameras becoming inoperable when they try to take a picture of Robert, only to begin working again when they left the museum. And others experienced life-altering hardships after leaving Robert the doll, like divorces, loss of employment, and even deaths. This led to people writing letters or returning to the museum to ask for Robert's forgiveness for taking his picture without his consent. Now, this is an actual real thing. People really write letters to this Robert the doll. And one such letter reads, "Dear Robert, I just want to apologize for taking a photo of you before I asked permission. I must not have heard the instructions correctly before I photographed you. Since our meeting, I've suffered a series of heartbreaking misfortune. Please forgive me. Again, please accept my sincere apologies, and if you see fit to forgive and end the bad luck, I would appreciate it, as would my family. Thank you, your friend and admirer, James." Now, Robert the doll still sits inside a glass case, and you can still see him today. But the glass doesn't seem to stop him from inflicting fear and discomfort to museum staff and visitors. So be warned, if you do go to visit Robert at the Fort East Martello Museum, please afford Robert the respect he requires and ask him for permission to take his photo. You could be in for some very hard times if you don't. All right, that'll do it for The Puppeteer by Criminal AF.
Fast as fuck, boy.
Let us all know what you thought of this episode. Comment on Good Pods or Spotify, or leave a review on Apple Podcasts. Thank you all for hanging out with me. Head on over to criminalasfuck.com to ask us anything you like via our mail call tab, or if you'd like us to give our shitty advice on any situation that's plaguing you, hit us up on the Dear Douchebags tab. Signing off from Studio Chloroform. Keep your head on a swivel and stay safe till next time. See ya.
Now give me our theme music!